one of the things that fascinates me is how bad we are as humans at imagining the future. This was really made aware to me in recent years when people started pointing out things like the movie Mad Max, the original one, was actually set in 2023. And I started, I've always heard complaints about the Jetsons, the cartoon show, about how we don't have almost a single thing that was predicted to be a part. And that show was set in 2062, but that we're like not even really in danger of getting close to some of the stuff predicted in that show. And, obviously the Back to the Future films, as they jumped around, showed glimpses of a predicted or an expected future, an imagined future. And that's especially for somebody who is a teenager, and we don't have those skateboards, the hoverboards that float. And so whenever a new technology comes out that looks like it might have something to do with the futuristic predictions of the Jetsons or Back to the Future, or our politics start to look like Mad Max, I pay attention. I mentioned in a sermon 2 weeks ago that every December I read 2 books. One is this one, The Physics of Christmas, from the aerodynamics of reindeer to the thermodynamics of turkey. And the other is The First Christmas, which is what we're talking about. But in this book, one of the chapters towards the end, the author tries to predict the future. And so he imagines what Christmas 2020 was going to be like. Now, this book was written in 1998. And so trying to predict even 22 years ahead, it's really, and it's sort of a fun exercise, but ultimately it's an exercise in futility because, like I said, as humans, we can barely predict the next presidential cycle in politics, let alone the economy and so many other things, the environment and generational changes. And it's fascinating to me how much we struggle to have a different expectation of, in an accurate way, of what the world's going to look like. So this brings me to the beginning of our book, The First Christmas. In that first chapter, an exercise is done, which is to try and base a Christmas pageant entirely on Matthew's story, and then another one entirely on Luke's story. And it's a great exercise because it exposes how different Matthew's narrative is versus Luke's. But, in modern Christmas pageants, they all get blended together and amalgamated into one story. And we're going to talk about that in coming days. But if you take time to read, and by the way, if you don't have the book, if you weren't able to buy the book, you can just go to books.google, Google Books, and it's on there, and you can read it there on your computer. But one of the reasons that exercise really caught my attention the first time I read it wasn't just that it illuminates the difference between Matthew's and Luke's Gospels, but because it, for me, illustrates that one of the reasons it's tough for us as humans to predict the future or imagine how the world will be is because we also struggle to imagine how our current world could be different. And so I invite you, as you read that first chapter of The First Christmas by Crossan and Borg, to hear what they are imagining. Like for Matthew, there's a lot of begetting, right? This person begat that person. And what he's saying is this is the road that's delivered us to here. And then he tells the census story. And what he's saying is, and here's what we're up against. So Matthew's story is really, here's how we got here, and here's what we're up against. And then you can see that Luke's doing something a little different. So I just want to encourage you that as humans, not only are we currently, and we have a lot more variables now, I think, but traditionally, historically, we're not great at predicting or imagining the future. And part of that is rooted in that we have a tough time imagining that our current world could work a different way. And that's part of where our gospel stories start. Our Christmas stories are trying to imagine that the world could be different. So read it with that lens and see if it stands out to you, and I'll check in with you tomorrow. Leave any comments you have, any questions. Even though I got called out of town somewhat unexpectedly, I am still doing work remotely, and so I'll be able to see your responses and questions and comments, and we'll begin a dialogue that will take us through December.